The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is one of the most extraordinary accounts in all of Scripture, a narrative that combines history, faith, and courage in a way that continues to inspire hearts even today. It begins in the powerful empire of Babylon, a land of towering walls, golden palaces, and kings who demanded not only loyalty, but worship. Into this setting, 3 young men from Judah were carried as captives, far from their homeland, far from the temple of their God, and placed in the very heart of a culture that opposed everything they believed in. Babylon was a symbol of human strength and pride, an empire that absorbed the best of the nations it conquered. For many exiles, this meant losing identity, adopting new customs, and blending into the overwhelming tide of foreign influence. Yet for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, compromise was never an option. They lived in Babylon, but Babylon never lived in them. Their hearts remained anchored in the God of Israel, even when the world around them sought to redefine who they were. The tension of their story is something deeply relatable. Each of us faces our own version of Babylon, a world that pressures us to bow, to conform, to trade conviction for comfort. The lives of these young men speak across time, reminding us that faithfulness is possible even in the most difficult of environments. Their courage is not just a story of the past, it is a challenge to the present, calling us to stand firm in what we believe, even when the cost is great. What makes their story so compelling is not only the miracle of the fiery furnace, but the spirit with which they faced it. They were not delivered from trial, but through trial, showing us that real faith is not about escaping hardship, but trusting God in the middle of it. Their example declares that even in the hottest fire, we are never alone. This truth has carried countless people through their own struggles, and it continues to be a source of strength today. As we walk through their story, we will see themes of loyalty, courage, and divine protection unfold. We will step into the courts of kings, feel the heat of the furnace, and witness the unshakable resolve of those who chose faith over fear. And in doing so, we may find ourselves reflecting on our own lives, asking where we might be called to stand firm, and how God is present even in our greatest challenges. If you enjoy messages like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and leave a comment with your thoughts. When Nebuchadnezzar's armies marched into Jerusalem, the city was shaken to its core. Families were torn apart, the sacred temple was plundered, and many young men of noble birth were carried away as captives to Babylon. Among these captives were 4 young Jews, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The Babylonians, in their strategy of conquest, did not simply conquer lands and leave them in ruins. They sought to reshape the conquered peoples, especially the brightest and most promising youth. These young men were not taken randomly, but were carefully chosen for their intelligence, appearance, and potential to serve in the king's administration. Upon their arrival in Babylon, the process of transformation began almost immediately. New names were given to them, symbolic of the empire's attempt to strip away their identity. Daniel became Belteshazzar, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. These new names were tied to Babylonian deities, a constant reminder of the empire's desire to reshape their allegiance and erase their roots. Yet despite the renaming, the heart of these young men remained loyal to the God of Israel. They were enrolled in a rigorous program of training, designed to prepare them for service in the king's court. This education was not merely academic, it was cultural indoctrination, meant to align their worldview with the philosophies and beliefs of Babylon. They studied the language, literature, and wisdom of the Chaldeans, absorbing knowledge that was impressive and expansive, yet foreign to their upbringing. For many captives, this was a path to privilege and survival, a chance to rise in status within the empire. Yet for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, along with Daniel, the challenge was deeper. Every meal, Every lesson, every demand placed before them became a test of their integrity. When offered food and drink from the king's table, they faced a dilemma. These meals, while luxurious, were often dedicated to idols and prepared in ways that violated their laws. Choosing to abstain was not a small decision, it was an act of defiance against the expectations of the empire. With courage and wisdom, Daniel requested a different diet, one of vegetables and water, trusting that God would sustain them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego joined in this stand, and their decision bore fruit. After 10 days, they appeared healthier and stronger than the others who ate the royal food. This was more than a dietary success, it was a testimony that faithfulness to God brings strength, even in hostile environments. As time went on, their diligence, wisdom, and integrity set them apart. When they stood before the king, they were found to be 10 times wiser than all the magicians and enchanters of the empire. Their rise from captives to advisors was remarkable, yet it was not the result of compromise, but of steadfast devotion. Their new positions brought influence and visibility. They were no longer simply exiles in a foreign land. They became men who carried responsibility within the empire itself. Yet with every step upward came greater scrutiny and greater temptation to blend in. Their ability to maintain their faith while serving in the very heart of Babylon was a powerful statement. It showed that while the empire could change their names and attempt to shape their outward lives, it could not alter the allegiance of their hearts. The journey from captivity to influence was not accidental. It was a deliberate unfolding of God's providence, placing these young men in positions where their faith would not only be tested, but displayed before the nations. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were more than survivors of exile. They became lights in a land of darkness, influencing not by compromise, but by conviction. Their story reminds us that faithfulness in small decisions often prepares us for larger trials. Refusing the king's food may have seemed like a minor act, yet it was the foundation for greater acts of courage to come. By remaining true to their God in matters of daily discipline, they were being prepared for the moment when the empire would demand something far greater: their worship. King Nebuchadnezzar was a ruler unlike any other in his time. His empire stretched across vast territories, and his achievements made Babylon the jewel of the ancient world. Yet with such power came pride, and with pride came the desire for recognition that exceeded mere respect. He did not only want loyalty from his people, he demanded worship. This desire gave birth to one of the most dramatic decrees in history, a command that would test the allegiance of every person under his rule. The king ordered the construction of a golden image, towering and dazzling, set up on the plain of Dura. Its sheer size was designed to overwhelm the senses, a visible reminder of Babylon's might and the king's absolute authority. When the sound of music filled the air, horns, flutes, lyres, and every kind of instrument, all people were commanded to fall down and worship the image. It was a command not of choice, but of compulsion, and failure to obey meant death in a fiery furnace. For the Babylonians and many others in the empire, bowing before the statue may not have seemed difficult. Idolatry was woven into the fabric of their culture, and reverence for kings and gods was part of daily life. But for the Jews living in exile, this decree was a direct assault on their faith. The first commandment of their covenant with God was clear: "You shall have no other gods before me." To bow before the golden image was not simply an act of submission to the king, it was an act of betrayal against the God who had called them. The dilemma was heavy and unavoidable. The music would play, the people would bow, and any who refused would stand out as defiant, making them immediate targets for punishment. For many, the fear of the furnace was enough to silence conviction. Who could withstand the thought of being burned alive in flames prepared by the king's order? The weight of the command was designed to crush resistance and enforce conformity through fear. In the midst of this atmosphere, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced a choice that would define their lives. They were not ordinary citizens of Babylon, but officials serving in positions of influence. Their refusal to obey would not only be noticed, it would be seen as direct defiance against Nebuchadnezzar himself. To stand firm would risk their positions, their reputations, and ultimately their lives. The tension of this moment reveals the heart of the story. The decree was not just about bowing to a statue, it was about the clash between two kingdoms, the kingdom of man that demanded conformity and the kingdom of God that demanded faithfulness. Each person had to decide where their ultimate loyalty lay. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the decision was already made long before the music played. Their allegiance to God was unwavering, and no command of man, no threat of fire could alter it. They understood that worship belongs to God alone, and to bow before any image, no matter how grand, was unthinkable. The golden image stood as a symbol of human pride and power, but in the hearts of these three men, another reality was burning brighter: the conviction that true power belongs not to kings or empires, but to the God of heaven and earth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal the depth of their faith and the limits of Babylon's power. When the decree was announced and the music played, crowds fell to their knees before the golden image. The scene was overwhelming, a sea of bowed heads stretching across the plain, all united in outward submission to the king's command. Yet, in the midst of the multitude, three figures remained standing: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their refusal was not hidden, it was in full view of the empire. This act of defiance could not go unnoticed. The Babylonian officials, eager to expose any who resisted the king's authority, quickly reported the three Jews to Nebuchadnezzar. Their words were laced with accusation and hostility. These men neither served the king's gods nor worshipped the golden image set up by him. For a king whose pride burned as fiercely as the furnace itself, this was an intolerable challenge. Nebuchadnezzar summoned them at once, his fury evident, yet even in his anger he offered them a chance to reconsider. He asked if the reports were true and gave them an opportunity to bow when the music played again. His warning was clear: if they refused, they would be thrown into the furnace, and no god could deliver them from his hand. The moment was charged with tension. Many would have seen compromise as the logical choice, reasoning that one act of outward conformity could preserve their lives while keeping their faith inwardly intact. Yet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not flinch. Their reply was calm yet resolute, a declaration of faith that has echoed through the centuries. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we will not serve your gods or worship the image you have set up. Their words reveal the heart of true conviction. Faith was not a bargaining tool for them. It was not dependent on outcome. Whether delivered or consumed by fire, their loyalty to God would remain unbroken. They stood before the most powerful man in the world, yet their eyes were fixed on the one who holds ultimate power. This unshaken resolve was not born in that single moment. It had been forged through years of faithfulness in smaller matters. From the food they ate to the prayers they prayed, their lives had been marked by consistent devotion. When the greater test came, they were ready, not because they suddenly found courage, but because courage had been cultivated through daily choices to honor God. Nebuchadnezzar's rage grew at their response. His pride could not tolerate defiance, especially not from those he had elevated to positions of authority. To stand against his decree was to challenge his very throne. The furnace was prepared, the heat intensified, and the sentence was sealed. What stands out in this moment is the dignity of their refusal. They did not argue, they did not insult the king, they simply stood firm. Their strength was not in loud protest, but in quiet, unwavering conviction. This kind of strength cannot be manufactured by fear or pressure. It comes only from a heart anchored in unshakable faith. The resolve of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stands as a timeless reminder that true faith is not measured by convenience, but by sacrifice. It shines brightest, not when the cost is small, but when the flames of the furnace roar before us and we choose loyalty to God above all else. With their refusal echoing in the king's ears, Nebuchadnezzar's fury reached its peak. His face twisted with anger, and his command was issued with urgency: heat the furnace 7 times hotter than usual. The soldiers rushed to obey, feeding the flames until the furnace roared with unimaginable heat. The decision was final, and the punishment was imminent. The 3 men were bound with ropes, their hands and feet tied, as they were dragged toward the furnace. The soldiers who carried them were strong and disciplined, yet even they could not withstand the heat. As they approached, the flames leapt outward with such intensity that the very men assigned to carry out the execution were consumed on the spot. The trial that awaited Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was unlike anything they could have imagined. A fire so fierce that even proximity brought death. From the perspective of the watching crowd, the outcome seemed certain. No human could survive such a furnace. To be thrown into it was to face immediate and total destruction. The scene was tragic. 3 young men cut down in their prime, lives wasted in defiance of the king's command. Babylon had seen countless executions before, yet this one carried a different weight, for it was not only a punishment, but a demonstration of what happens when the authority of the king is challenged. The image of their bodies being thrown into the fire was meant to strike fear into the hearts of all who witnessed it. The message was clear: obedience was survival, defiance was death. Nebuchadnezzar sat in confidence, convinced that his power was absolute and his will unstoppable. The furnace was his instrument of control, a symbol of the fate awaiting any who dared resist. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the moment of truth had arrived. Bound and helpless, they fell into the flames, their lives surrendered to the fire. Yet their earlier words still rang true. They trusted in a God who was able to deliver them, and even if deliverance did not come, they would remain faithful. The trial by flames was not only physical, but spiritual. The fire represented the full force of human opposition, the attempt of earthly power to extinguish faith. Yet as the flames raged, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would turn the furnace from a place of death into a stage for divine power. The eyes of the empire were fixed on the furnace. What began as an execution would soon become a revelation, one that no amount of human planning could orchestrate. Nebuchadnezzar's pride had set the stage, but it was God's power that was about to be displayed in a way no one could deny. As Nebuchadnezzar peered into the furnace, expecting to see nothing more than the consumed remains of the 3 young men, his expression shifted from triumph to astonishment. Rising from his seat, he asked his officials a question that carried both confusion and fear. Did we not throw 3 men bound into the flames? His attendants confirmed it, yet what he saw before him defied all logic. Instead of 3 men lying lifeless in the blaze, there were 4 figures walking freely in the midst of the fire, unharmed and unbound. The scene was beyond comprehension. Fire that should have devoured flesh and bone seemed to have lost its power. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were moving within the flames, as though walking in a cool garden, untouched by the inferno raging around them. Their ropes, which had bound them so tightly, were gone, consumed by the fire that could not touch their bodies. Most astonishing of all was the presence of the 4th figure, radiant and otherworldly, whose appearance Nebuchadnezzar described as being like a son of the gods. This moment was not merely a miracle of survival, it was a revelation. The furnace, meant to be a place of death, had become the stage for the unveiling of divine presence. The mysterious fourth figure was a sign that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not alone in their trial. Many have speculated about the identity of this figure. Some see an angel sent to guard and protect them. Others believe it was the pre-incarnate Christ walking with them in the fire as a foreshadowing of his role as deliverer and savior. Regardless of interpretation, what is undeniable is the message it conveys. When the faithful are tested by fire, they are never abandoned. The presence of the fourth man declared that divine power is not distant or passive, but near and active, stepping into the very places where human strength fails. The fire, which should have destroyed, became a testimony of companionship and deliverance. The miracle carried a deeper symbolism as well. The ropes that once bound the three men were the only things consumed by the flames. In other words, the fire that was intended to destroy them became the very tool that set them free. Trials often work in this way, burning away what binds while revealing a strength that cannot be taken. In the furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego discovered not only God's protection, but also his power to turn instruments of destruction into instruments of liberation. For Nebuchadnezzar, this was a humbling confrontation with a reality greater than his own authority. His furnace, the ultimate weapon of fear, had been overturned by a higher power. The sight of four figures in the fire shattered the illusion of his control. He had declared that no god could deliver these men from his hand, yet here was undeniable proof that the God of Israel was not bound by the limits of human rule. The crowd that had gathered witnessed more than they could have imagined. What was intended as a warning to instill fear became a proclamation of faith's endurance. The fourth figure in the furnace stood as a visible reminder that no empire, no decree, and no fire could silence the power of God's presence with his people. The story of the fourth man continues to echo across generations, offering hope to all who feel the flames of trials surrounding them. It speaks of a God who does not always prevent the fire, but promises to be present within it, ensuring that the flames will not have the final word. When Nebuchadnezzar saw the miraculous sight within the furnace, he could no longer remain seated. With urgency, he approached as close as he dared and called out to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. His words revealed a shift in perspective, for he addressed them as servants of the Most High God. The same king who had condemned them for refusing to bow now acknowledged a power greater than his own authority. At the sound of his voice, the three men walked out of the fire. The crowd watched in stunned silence as they emerged, their clothes unburned, their hair untouched, and their bodies completely unharmed. The detail that astonished the witnesses most was that not even the smell of smoke clung to them. What had been designed as a death sentence became a public demonstration of deliverance. Officials, governors, and royal advisors gathered around them, examining with their own eyes what their minds could scarcely believe. Every expectation of the furnace had been overturned. Instead of ashes, they saw life. Instead of fear, they saw faith vindicated. The deliverance was undeniable, and no amount of explanation or reasoning could erase what stood before them. For Nebuchadnezzar, this event was more than a miracle. It was a direct challenge to his pride. He had built the golden image to exalt his power, yet here was evidence that true power belonged elsewhere. In response, he publicly praised the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, acknowledging that no other God could save in this way. Though his heart was not fully transformed, this confession revealed the undeniable impact of the witness he had just observed. The testimony of these men extended beyond their survival. Their refusal to bow, their willingness to face death, and their miraculous deliverance combined into a powerful witness that shook the foundations of the empire. The story of what happened on the plain of Dura would spread across Babylon, reminding all who heard it that there exists a God whose authority surpasses even the might of kings. Deliverance is never just for the individuals who experience it. it is also for the world that watches. The courage of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego became a beacon of hope for other Jews living in exile, showing them that faithfulness could stand against the strongest pressures. For the nations surrounding Babylon, it was a proclamation that the God of Israel was not bound to a ruined temple, but was alive and active even in foreign lands. What makes their witness so powerful is that it was not rooted in a desire for recognition, but in simple devotion. They did not set out to prove a point or gain influence. They simply chose obedience. Yet their obedience created a testimony that reached beyond their own lives, impacting kings and kingdoms. As they stood before Nebuchadnezzar, unharmed and unshaken, their very existence declared a truth that no furnace could silence. God delivers those who trust in him, and his power is not limited by the threats of men. The account of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is not confined to the ancient world. It speaks into the lives of all who face the fires of trial today. While few may stand before a physical furnace, the pressures of life often feel just as consuming. The flames take different forms: persecution, rejection, loss, illness, or the daily demands of a culture that pulls hearts away from faith. Each person, in some way, knows the heat of a furnace that threatens to overwhelm. The story reminds us that faith does not mean exemption from fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not spared from being thrown into the furnace. They were spared within it. This distinction matters because it reflects the reality that faith does not shield us from hardship, but sustains us through it. God's presence is often most evident not in the absence of trouble, but in the midst of it, where strength and peace carry us beyond what human endurance can manage. Another lesson lies in the way their ropes were burned away while their bodies remained untouched. The trials we face often expose and remove the things that bind us. Fear, pride, or misplaced trust can be consumed in the fire, leaving us freer than before. What feels destructive at first can become the very means by which God shapes and refines character, producing resilience and faith that cannot be shaken. The courage of these three men also challenges us to consider where our ultimate loyalty lies. In a world filled with pressures to conform, whether to ideologies, cultural trends, or personal ambitions, the temptation to bow is ever present. The example of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego calls for steadfastness, a willingness to stand firm even when the majority kneels. Their story declares that true integrity is revealed not in comfort but in conflict, not in ease but in trial. Equally important is the reminder that they stood together. Faith often feels strongest when shared, and their unity and conviction gave them strength to face the furnace. Standing alone can be daunting, but standing with others who share the same devotion provides courage that multiplies. Their companionship reflects the power of community in sustaining faith during seasons of trial. The appearance of the fourth figure in the fire continues to be a source of hope for every believer. It is a promise that in every fiery furnace, whether physical or metaphorical, we are never abandoned. The presence of God may not always remove the flames, but it ensures they will not destroy. This truth transforms the way we face hardship, turning fear into trust and despair into hope. The story also teaches that our trials can become testimonies. Just as their deliverance influenced Nebuchadnezzar and the entire empire, so too can our endurance in hardship speak volumes to those around us. A life of faith under pressure becomes a living witness that points others toward the God who sustains and delivers. Every furnace we face carries within it the potential for a greater revelation. The flames that threaten to consume may become the stage upon which God's power is displayed, not only for us, but for the world watching. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego remind us that the fires of life are not the end, but often the beginning of a deeper encounter with the one who walks with us through them all. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego does not end with their deliverance from the flames. It continues as a legacy that has shaped generations of faith. Their courage in the face of overwhelming power, their refusal to bow when the world demanded compromise, and their deliverance in the midst of fire all serve as enduring reminders of what it means to trust fully in God. Their lives stand as a testimony that true faith cannot be broken by fear nor consumed by flames. Nebuchadnezzar himself was forced to acknowledge the greatness of their God. He decreed that no one in his empire should speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, for no other could deliver in the way that he had. While the king's heart still wrestled with pride, his words marked a turning point, showing how the faith of three young men had influenced the highest throne of their time. What had begun as an act of quiet obedience became a declaration to the nations. The legacy of these men reaches far beyond Babylon. Throughout history, believers facing persecution have looked to their example for strength. From the early church under Roman rule to countless men and women throughout the centuries who endured trials for their faith, the story of the fiery furnace has remained a source of inspiration. It whispers into the hearts of the faithful that courage is possible, that conviction is worth the cost, and that deliverance belongs to God. Their legacy also calls us to consider the impact of our own faith. Few may stand before kings, and few may face literal flames, yet each person's faith has the power to influence those around them. Acts of integrity, moments of courage, and choices to remain faithful in small or great trials all become part of a testimony that can inspire others. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego never sought fame or recognition. Yet their story lives on because they chose faithfulness over fear. The unbreakable faith they carried also reveals something about the nature of God. He is not distant from the struggles of his people, but walks with them, even in the most dangerous places. Their survival is not only proof of their courage, but evidence of God's commitment to those who trust him. The fourth man in the fire remains a symbol of hope for every generation, reminding us that we never face trials alone. What makes their legacy truly unshakable is that it continues to call people higher. It challenges complacency, urging us to live lives marked not by compromise, but by conviction. It inspires perseverance, teaching that faith is not a fleeting emotion, but a steady anchor that holds firm in the storms of life. It reassures us that no matter how hot the furnace may feel, deliverance is never beyond God's reach. The story closes with these three men stepping out of the flames unharmed, yet the impact of their faith continues to burn brightly across time. They remind us that life's greatest victories are not won through power or wealth, but through courage, conviction, and trust in God. Conviction and trust in God. Their legacy is not one of survival alone, but of testimony, a living story that still speaks to hearts today, urging all who hear it to live with unbreakable faith. Their witness leaves a lasting truth. Kingdoms rise and fall, kings come and go, but faith that is rooted in God endures forever. The fire of Babylon has long since burned out, but the flame of their faith continues to shine, guiding countless souls through the furnaces of life. If this story has spoken to your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more powerful messages like this one. Remember to like this video to help it reach more people. Share it with your family and friends so they too can be encouraged, and leave a comment below about what lesson from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's story touched you the most. Your support helps spread these timeless truths, and together we can inspire others to live with courage and faith.